Hey guys, this video is on the surface about a Japanese anime. However, if you're not into anime, don't worry, because the deeper meaning is more about Japanese culture. And you do find that with a lot of anime. When you watch Japanese animations, you do tend to pick up all sorts of stuff about Japanese culture. And if you live here, you'll recognize all sorts of things about Japanese culture, which is actually often quite nice. You know, even things like scenery and things like that as well, you know, so recognize things from Japanese life and from Japanese culture. However, we watched one yesterday that was just too close to reality, and it was called Mirai no Mirai. So in this case, there was a baby, a little baby girl, and her name was Mirai, and Mirai also means future. So the name of the video, the name of the movie is Mirai's Future, right? So the plot was, and I don't want to get into it too much. If you're interested in it, it's better to watch it. So you go find it on the internet and watch it. It's on YouTube. You pay $4 and you can watch it on YouTube. So the basic story is that there's a family, there's a mother and father and a boy who's about 5 or 6 years old, and then a baby is born, a baby girl. And of course, as what often happens in the case of new babies coming into the homes, the older child is often feels a bit ignored, right? Because the baby becomes the center of attention, right? So a lot of you would recognize that story. That's quite common, isn't it? And then he reacts to that. And then the story is that the way they do it is that whether it's through his fantasizing or whether it's through whatever the magic of animation, what they do is he's hanging out in the garden and he meets that little baby girl, that little baby sister, as a teenager. So she appears as a teenager and they talk and play and have a relationship, a connection, you know. And then later he meets his grandfather when his grandfather was young, and he meets his mother when his mother was the same age as him, and all this sort of stuff. So it is sort of a dreamlike fantasy type situation, right? And it's sort of exploring the different relationships and different reasons that different people are the way they are, you know. So if you're interested in that, have a look at that. The problem I had with it, now first of all, before I forget, I've got to say this. I know some very skilled parents in Japan that are very, very skilled at raising their children. And I know some families in Japan that have very good relationships within the families, between the different members of the family. So I've got to make that really clear right from the start, right? And I also know lots of people outside Japan who are not skilled parents and who have pretty poor relationships within their families, right? So just want to make that clear right from the start. However, what was really hard to watch about this movie was it was so real in that, where to start? So the boy was reacting badly to this baby girl, right? And he's trying to get his parents' attention. So he's throwing tantrums. He's throwing his toys around the house, and he's yelling and screaming, and he's behaving pretty badly, right? And trying to get his parents' attention, right? And the frustrating thing was how they reacted to it. So the mother was just totally absorbed with the baby and just not even noticing that the kid's standing there screaming. Oh, I've got to throw in too, they also had a little Fifi, a little dog that barked constantly, right? Whenever there was something exciting happening, or whenever there was noise, this dog barked constantly, right? So you've got this dog barking constantly, you've got this 5 or 6 year old boy screaming and throwing a tantrum, you know, yada, 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 I don't want to, you know, like a 2-year-old, you know, this big tantrum. The mother's sort of oblivious, just looking after the baby, and the father's totally incompetent, right? The father's totally incompetent. The father's sort of flustered, constantly flustered, and he's trying to do the work in the kitchen, and he's trying to cook dinner, and he's totally incompetent, but keeps burning his hands, keeps grabbing hot things in the ach, and everything's hot, and he's burning himself. Now, I'll throw in right now, we know a family exactly like this. We see people like this all the time, and we know a family exactly like this. The kids behave like that. The father is just incompetent and ignored by everybody, right? Ignored by everybody. Nobody listens to him. The wife doesn't listen to him. This is real, right? This isn't the anime. This is a real family that we know, that we visit sometimes. And everybody ignores him. The wife doesn't listen to him. The kids don't listen to him. And the dog, the little dog that looks just like the one in the anime, barks its head off, and it doesn't listen to him either, and doesn't respect him, and barks at him and treats him. So the whole family treat him with no respect, and he's constantly flustered. And it's really common. It's a really, really common thing. And you see it all the time here with exactly all that. Kids throwing tantrums and parents ignoring them. Mothers totally absorbed in something else and not noticing what's going on around them. Quite often staring at their smartphone, actually, but all sorts of different things. And then these incompetent fathers that just seem to be always flustered. I mean, they may well be very good at whatever they do at work, but when it comes to the family life, constantly flustered. And this, in this anime, this guy kept grabbing things in the kitchen. So, he'd boil water and he'd grab the thing and burn his hand. Ach, 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 ach. That's what Japanese people say when they burn themselves. And then he was cooking something else and he grabbed it and he burned himself. Ach, 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 ach. And he must have done it like 10 times, kept grabbing. And he's all flustered and he's spilling things and he's running around. And the boy's screaming at him. And he's just not reacting to it and not answering the kid, not responding to him. And the dog's barking its head off and he's ignoring it. And that's exactly what we see. We see it all the time. We see it, those people that we visit is exactly that scene with the barky dog and everything. The whole thing is just exactly like that. But you also see it in restaurants. You be sitting in a restaurant and there'll be some kid throwing a tantrum and the parents just keep looking at the menu and don't react. I mean, you guys know, those of you who are parents know, if a kid is throwing a tantrum or crying or whatever they're doing, they want attention. And they're going about it in not a cool way, but they're kids, right? They want attention. And usually if you address whatever it is that they're on about, they'll be cool, right? I know, just wait a minute, we're going to do this and then we'll do that. And usually that's enough. Here, just colour this thing in until we're ready for dinner, Usually if you address it and communicate with them, and we see this all the time. You'll be in the park, there'll be a kid crying and the father's all flustered and doesn't know what to do. Just constantly see stuff like this, and it's a combination of a few things. We've said on lots of previous videos how quite often living in Japan is like living in the past. I find when I speak to some Australian family members about this, sometimes about some of the things that happen in Japan as far as relationships and communication, and they'll quite often, some of our older family members will say, it was like that in Australia back in the 50s, or it was like that, and quite often socially and relationship wise, quite often the way things are in Japan is sort of like it was in some other countries in the past, where people didn't communicate so well about their feelings or their thinking, or modern ideas on relationships and psychology and parenting and all that sort of stuff haven't made it here yet. And you're not exposed to it. In another country, you see it. You'll often see stuff on TV. Sometimes you'll see a TV program about how to be a good parent, right? Straight out, there it all is laid out for you. And there's books on the subject that people read and things like that. But more than that, you see positive examples of it all the time. The Brady Bunch just came to mind, but bad example, but not really. If you think about it, shows like the Brady Bunch showed that sort of stuff. One of the kids has got a problem, the parents communicate with them, solve the problem, it's all good. Brady Bunch was a bit idealistic and a bit but think about that. That was like 50 years ago or whatever it was, and you wouldn't see something like that in Japan. You don't see that. You don't see it on TV. You don't see it in just modern media, and then you don't hear it. In a lot of countries, parents will sit around at barbecues and talk about what goes on with their kids, and I don't know what to do with him. He's driving me crazy, and they'll bounce ideas off each other and get ideas from each other and learn how to be better parents, and they don't do that here. That stuff that was in that anime, it was really hard to watch. Because that stuff that was in that anime, that was so real. That's what it's like here. And they think it's normal. And as I've said in a million other videos, if they think something is normal, they don't think about changing it. It's normal, right? So if I said, I didn't say a word when we were watching this to my wife or my kids about this, except one time there was something that happened and I made a little comment, but I was really careful not to say much because that's what they see all the time, all around them, so they think it's normal. Luckily, our house isn't like that, usually. Usually our house isn't like that. But they know lots of family members and friends and people that we see all the time whose families are just like that. So I can't sit there and be critical of it because they see that all the time and they think it's normal. I just realised the other one I didn't mention too, the mother screaming. So what would happen would be, you got the dog barking, you got the little boy throwing a tantrum, the baby crying, and so you got this incredible, terrible noise, and then the mother would scream at the husband, rah 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 rah, and the husband's really timid and okay, and that we see that all the time too. That house I said that is exactly like that house, that happens there too. That mother screams. She'll scream at the kids, and it scares the hell out of you because everybody's sort of sitting around doing something, and the little kid's going la 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 na 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 na, and the mother will ignore it, and then suddenly, and because you're noticing that the kid's going on trying to get the mother's attention, and the mother's talking about something else, and then suddenly she'll turn to the kid and scream at the kid, rah, and scare the hell out of us because we're sitting there trying to relax, and suddenly she screams, and she screams at the husband. And then turns to us and talks to us really nicely. And see, that's really common here. That's really common here. That the screaming tyrannical mother is considered to be just a normal thing. That she's got to do that to run the household. That's the way they see that. That it's an important ingredient. The mother has to be tough and sort of, rah at everybody to make sure, tell the husband what he should do and tell the kids what they should do and rah 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 rah. And that they see that as normal. That's what mothers do, and to the point where husbands and kids will both do this Oni thing. They'll put their fingers up above their head, like a horns, right? And so when they're talking about their wife or their mother, quite often I'll say, "Oh, how's your mum?" And they'll just put their fingers up in the air like horns on their head. How's your wife? And they'll just put the finger, they won't say anything, they'll just put the fingers up like horns on their head, and it means devil or demon, right? And that's really normal here for kids and husbands to refer to the mother of the house as a demon. Not necessarily saying the words, just doing this motion with their fingers. And it's considered normal, and a mother would think that was normal. If she heard her kids or saw her kids or husband doing that, referring to her, she wouldn't have a problem with that because that's considered normal here. She's a tough mother and she, keeps the house in order by screaming at everybody. It's really 60 years ago or 70 years ago, the modern communication, they don't have that modern communication skill where people calmly talk about stuff, and I talk about it with my wife a lot over the years, and I've said to her, being angry is not important. Being strict with kids is sometimes really important, isn't it? But being angry is not necessary. And it's the same, it goes outside the home too, because bosses are still the same. I talked about this on a previous video. Quite common for bosses to yell at staff here, line all the staff up and yell at them, right? Because they think that's normal too. They think that yelling and ranting and raving is a normal way to communicate, from a boss to communicate with staff, right? Which, modern thinking is that you can be strict without being angry. Why is angry? Angry is very unprofessional, isn't it? And it's the same as in the house. They seem to think that it's important for the mother to be screaming and angry, and then to compensate, usually not always, but usually the husbands are just really weak and really don't do any disciplining or raising of the kids at all. They're sort of like a kid themselves quite often in the way that they're treated. And that example, as people that we know, those kids have no respect for that father at all. He'll say to them, "Oh, come on, let's go," and they'll go, "No, go away." And he'll go, oh, he's all flustered and doesn't know how to react to that. And just, and this video, those of you who've seen the movie already will know what I'm talking about. Just cringy as hell to watch. Probably if you hadn't experienced this for real in Japan, it might not bother you, but having experienced it for real, is just cringy. It was really hard to watch. It was like I couldn't handle it. I really couldn't. I was like, oh, this is terrible, because it's all the worst things. You know, the kid throwing his tantrum, and you can't blame the kids, because kids will do what they're allowed to do, won't they? And, you know, the kid not getting any guidance. You know, some of you might remember I made a video a while ago. There was a Starbucks robot delivering Starbucks drinks and food in a shopping centre. And it was going through the shopping centre, this robot thing. And I was following along behind it with a camera and videoing it. You guys might have seen that video. But what you didn't see is I had to keep cutting bits out, because there was this little dude of about 5 or 6 years old who was following it the whole way. And he kept getting up next to it, which meant I couldn't film. I had to cut that bit out of my video, right? So that video was actually quite long, but I had to cut all the bits out with this little dude who was following this robot, and his father was walking about 10 meters behind both of us, and he's going, I can't remember the kid's name, Yoshi or something. Yoshi-kun, 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 Yoshi-kun. Right? All the way through the shopping centre. All the way through the shopping centre, like 5 minutes, 10 minutes. Yoshi-kun, Yoshi-kun. And because they just keep saying it and keep calling the kid's name, and the kid just ignores it. Right? Because the kid knows he can ignore it. The dad's calling him and he just ignores him. But the father just keeps saying the kid's name. So he's more annoying than the kid, because he's walking through the shopping centre going, Yoshi-kun, Yoshi-kun. And because you get that at the parks too. You will be in the park doing something, playing or eating, you know, having a picnic or something. And the same thing will happen. A father will call a kid, or a mother, but often fathers will call the kid, you know, and they just stand there and they just keep calling the kid. And the kid just ignores them, and they keep calling him, and they just keep calling him, and the kid ignores them. Just no parenting skills at all, you know? And so often what you'll see too, often with the mothers, is they'll call the kid 100 times, and the kid just ignores them, because the kid always ignores them. And then the mother will get hold of their arm and have a tug of war, trying to drag the kid to the car by the arm. And come on, Yoshi-kun, Yoshi-kun, and drag him by the arm. And the kid pulls back, you know, and you get this little tug of war match with the kid's arm. And it's like, what are you doing? They fight. They actually fight with their kids. Like, you know, not parenting them. Like two children. That's what it is. You know, we're talking about the different relationships, parent to child and adult to child and child to child. And quite often when you watch these adults, these parents and these kids, it's a child and child relationship. The parents will behave childishly as well, and you have these little childish fights between the parents and the kids, you know, and particularly the fathers, really childlike. And then the way the mothers talk to the husbands is quite often parent to child. Do this, I told you to do that, you go and do it. They go, oh, okay, and off they go. Really timid, really timid. We see it all the time. So, it's really frustrating to watch. You know, and sometimes it's hard to ignore. If you've got the next table next to you at the restaurant and some kid is throwing a tantrum, and you look over and, you know, the father's staring at his smartphone, playing a game, talk about childish, playing a game on his smartphone while his kid's sitting next to him throwing a tantrum, and the mother's screaming at the kid and the kid's ignoring her. Really common. Really common. You know, we see it all the time. So we know people whose families are like this, and we see people that we don't know at different things like this, you know, parks and restaurants and so on, that behave just like this. So those of you who live in Japan will be sitting there nodding, going, yeah, doesn't it make you crazy? No doubt there'll be some people sitting there who see the same thing in their own country, and, you know, there's no doubt. None of these things are exclusive to Japan, but this is super common. You know, and again, not every family. We know some really happy, well-balanced families here, but it's just not normal. You know, we just don't have it. You know, there's no, when you become a parent for the first time, there's no instruction manual that comes with the kids. You know, we have to sort of work it out, and none of us are perfect. You know, none of us are perfect, but in a lot of other cultures, it's much easier to pick up parenting skills by watching things on TV and reading books and talking to your friends and talking to older parents, you know, because quite often people who've been parents for longer will have picked up a few tips as well. And usually from all these different places, we can learn some better parenting skills on how to be a better parent. And the communication thing, I think that's a big point too, is that Japanese people usually don't have good communication skills. They're programmed with all these programmed responses for different situations, but when it comes to really communicating, you know, they're usually not very good at it. And that's obviously a big problem because, you know, for parents or for anybody, but for husbands and wives and parents and kids, to sort of have decent relationships, you know, communications is important, and they just don't have the skills. Most of them, not all of them, but most of them just don't seem to have the skills. And instead of just, the kid starts to throw a tantrum, what is it? You know, what's the matter? We get it, we know. We've had kids throw tantrums in public places, you know. Come here, what's the matter? What is it? What do you want? You want that? I know. Well, let's do this first, and then we'll do that, you know. And then they're cool. Like, okay, all right, they can see what's going to happen. But what they do here is they ignore them. They'll be sitting there at the table in the restaurant ignoring that kid throwing the tantrum. It's on and on and on. You can hear this huge noise. It's like, come on, communicate with him. Talk to him, you know? Just amazing. Just amazing. And I mean, this goes across the board with relationships here and communications and so on. But in this particular case, the family thing. So if you haven't seen Mirai no Mirai, check it out. Just search it on YouTube. You can search it in Romaji. So Mirai, Mirai, no, you know, Mirai. Mirai no Mirai. And it's about $4. You can watch it on YouTube. So check it out, because if you can handle it, it'll show you a really good example of what Japanese relationships in the family are like. It's classic. Right down to the little barky dog, which that is exactly like that family that I was thinking about, you know. I can't handle going to their place. It makes me crazy. They live in this place that's all tiles and things, and it gets an echo, and it's just this roaring noise in there of screaming kids and barky dog and screaming mother, and it's stressful. It's really stressful, but they just think it's normal. So they're all just cruising around. They think it's normal, but for normal people, see, they're normal. The problem with Japan that you find in Japan is they think because things like this are normal here, they tell you it's normal. I think, futsu, you know, it's normal. But what they don't realize is in the big picture, in the world picture, that thing's not really normal anymore, right? Not really. It exists outside Japan, but it's not normal. It's not the goal. It's not what we aim for, is it? You know, that sort of household. Anyway, it's stressful, man. Really stressful stuff. Anyway, there it was. More videos coming soon.